So this is our first edition of Historians React to Video Games. And our guest today is Dr. Patricia Cleary, author of Elizabeth Murray and The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. She is a historian of colonial America, prize-winning author of work on Native Americans in the history of St. Louis, and our colleague and my office partner. So welcome.
Thank you very much,
yes.
Sean.
So today we are going to be playing Assassin's Creed 3 today. This is a game, as we sent out the trailer yesterday, that deals with colonial America, the American Revolution, Native American characters, and we were hoping that you could talk a little bit about how colonial history has been represented in other forms of popular culture before we start.
The first thing that springs to mind is Mel Gibson's The Patriot. And what that does is it captures the history of the American Revolution as a glossy Hollywood costume drama where Mel Gibson is an enlightened Southern plantation holder who has freed his slaves, pays them a good wage, and the British are basically Nazi sadists. So typically, the American Revolution is represented with a lot of accurate weaponry and costumes in Hollywood interpretations, and then everybody thinks about the 4th of July and the Declaration of Independence and fireworks, but I don't think it has a huge amount of contemporary popular cultural resonance. There have been other movies, like Alan Alda had one where he played a reenactor a long time ago. I think it was out in the late 80s, as I date myself. And then there's Al Pacino's Revolution. Right. Very bad movie.
1776.
1776. That's a great film. And
Hamilton.
Actually, okay, I haven't seen it yet. I know the score, but yes.
The Disney one.
Oh, Johnny Tremaine.
Johnny Tremaine.
Gosh, it's been a long time since I've seen that. But 1776 is actually pretty good. So I think people like to think about the American Revolution, but I'm not sure that it really is that widely celebrated. It doesn't. I don't think it has the same kind of appeal as Thanksgiving, for example. Do you?
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think people like the Declaration of Independence and they like the Constitution, but other than Schoolhouse Rock and everybody learning how to sing "We the People," it's hard to make the American Revolution catchy. I mean, children learn about Betsy Ross in 5th grade, and I know from talking to our students, as I'm sure you all do, that a lot of what people think about in terms of American history is that founding father generation of Adams, Washington, Hamilton, Revere. Betsy Ross makes the list.
It's the peripherals that people seem interested in.
Well, Betsy Ross, you can think about somebody sewing a flag, even though that tale is all wrong. And the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, they're popular. And of course, all of the dead white men on the money in our pockets help.
But I was thinking of something like the HBO show, the Addams series.
Yeah, you're making me backpedal.
Right,
yeah.
Built on McCullough's, McCullough's really long book about Addams, which kind of celebrates. Yeah, I guess that's what it does. It celebrates a singular character rather than thinking about the revolutionary
It's not
period.
the revolution as a whole, so that people can latch on to individual figures in that semi-divine, almost mythic pantheon that Thomas Jefferson talked about. And so many of the founding fathers, even as individuals, have become more problematic as we think more about the relationship to slavery, for example, or the exploitation of women and women who are enslaved, as in the case of Jefferson and Sally Hemings. But I think people like the stories of originators and founders, but thinking about the Revolutionary War, I don't think that has a lot of attraction. I know there are people who are reenactors. Reenacting is pretty popular, but I think more popular for the Civil War than for the American Revolution.
I think the Civil War is also more popular in film.
And in video games as well.
Video games as well.
And it's more recent. More people were involved fighting. It was much more on the home front that extended into the interior of the continent. Although battles of the Revolutionary Wars, we know took place as far west as St. Louis, although
Yes.
almost no one knows about that.
I mean, does it think that it's difficult because as many things, the revolution is kind of defining moment, like a birth in a sense, and to redefine that can be
Tricky.
difficult for many.
Yeah, and you were asking about the popular cultural representations of it. I think people are interested in reading about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have journalists and historians churning out biographies almost annually of Jefferson and Franklin and Adams, and their relative historical stock rises and falls. But with the exception of Hamilton, which is, I guess, a notable big runaway blockbuster, how much do people reflect on or think about the revolution in a popular culture sense?
Right, and I mean, other than Assassin's Creed 3, I can't think of another revolutionary set video game.
Not set, and the only ones that it's different, just when BioShock 3,
References,
robotized and references
certain aspects of it.
Not through a hagiographic lens, but using figures who are seen as heroes.
Right, it's all very heroic,
right,
with the exception of things like Jack Black's Drunken History of Benjamin Franklin, which is horrible and funny. And I suppose, actually, wasn't there a PBS Kids, Revolutionary Kids animated show?
Lynn Cheney's. I think she had written or was producer on that. And
I don't know.
But if she was, it makes sense as a way to use the revolution as a idealized sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's great for us as a culture to have heroes and ideals, but it's often difficult to address them in all of their complexity and to find a part that we want to live up to and emulate.
And I wonder, as we sit down to play this, I wonder also if this game doesn't do that as well, where the setting of Boston and New York is important, but not important, and where the characters of the Revolution, Washington, Franklin, Adams, kind of flitter in and out of the story, but don't really have any kind of real impact on the narrative and on the gameplay. There's really no role, except in the DLC, the downloadable content for The Tyranny of Washington, which reimagines.
Oh, I saw that in the trailer. Counterfactual. I was kind of rolling my eyeballs at that.
Yes.
But I'm not sure that it's not that they're not part of our popular culture, because the more I think about it, the more I think about place names of everything named after Washington and statues, and the almost obligatory trip that Americans make if they can afford to do so sometime when their children are middle school to early high school, to Washington, D.C., to go to the mall. But that's also about the Lincoln Memorial and so many other great museums that are there, that it's not really revolutionary centered. And maybe it's because the revolution is not only problematic for the individuals involved, but overthrowing a government
I've always
is
interested
problematic.
to think of the Americans tend not to think of the revolution as an overthrow in some ways, but then when there are revolutions elsewhere, we see them as messy and bloody. But somehow ours is just painted clear.
Right, and I think that's part of it, because it's about our independence. And independence can be celebrated, but in our own imperial history, self-determination of peoples who are under colonial rule is not necessarily what we've supported.
Oh, no. So it's messy?
Messy.
And so is this game.
Have you seen Hamilton?
No, I think we had the CD. We still listen to CDs.
Have you read Chernow's book?
No, and we enjoy the songs. And actually, Sean gave our child a very funny little Benjamin Franklin book, and so
I'm surprised it was humorous and or filled with satire.
No, it had a giant Franklin head on the cover, and I do tell stories when asked for yet another bedtime story. I'm now starting to tell stories about Sacagawea and Lewis and Clark, because those can take you through several nights. Just
yes, I have some of them.
late at night, but I'm just making up right now. Not making up. But.
Cool. Okay.
All right. Shall we?
I think now we can do a little gameplay, and we would like Dr. Cleary to watch
for a couple of minutes and comment as we play through some things.
Commentary
Okay.
about either the environment or you referenced one thing I like to talk about a lot is in what other historians have called in video games selective authenticity. That the apparel and particularly guns
Right.
and weaponry become fetishized and then take the place of what is authentic. Right?
Yes.
That's the authentic history, not the
narrative,
narrative around it.
Yes, and I'm trying to think. Somebody
Time
made a
period.
similar comment in an article, probably 20 years ago, about Hollywood and Roman-style haircuts. Right?
The
If you
Caesar
have,
do.
if you have the Caesar do, then the movie must be authentic. Or if it's set in the medieval European place and time, if there's a lot of mud, like Monty Python, Bring Out Your Dead.
Yes.
Yes.
And a lot of people who play video games tend to take that as them playing in, or potentially may take that to be playing in an authentically historical environment.
Right.
Well, and I think that's why our students need to be trained to be critical users of every kind of electronic medium, because it's the same thing with the internet. Because it's there in a form that looks good, then they give it their own critical stamp of approval.
Yeah, and it presents these stories with authority, right?
Right.
Because they're backed by a large development company, or because they have some, because the narrative suggests that it's based on a true story or that it's actual events from history. And they just, they swallow them in some ways.
I'm very curious to see, although a little bit trepidatious about what I'm going to see. But if you think about the American Revolutionary War as taking place in people's backyards, on their farms, in towns, as people are fleeing, there are a lot of women and children who are exposed and involved. So show me what
That is
you've
a
got.
good point, but I'm not sure we're going to see that in this game.
All right, okay.
So,
If we'd gotten to a point, particularly with the Iroquois, his village.
yes.
And there's
Women and children involved.
some references there.
You wish us to sail into the storm?
It's our only chance.
I won't do it.
Then I will.
All right.
But he has the assassins.
There's a small community.
Yeah, okay. Those are blades that you can assassinate people with. You'll eventually, your character that you play, who's half British, half Algonquin, will eventually earn his blades and be able to assassinate people in the streets of Boston, New York, and Philadelphia.
I told you this was
Calm
madness.
yourself. I'll fix
We were
your sail
hoping
for you.
to have some
Save points.
save points so we could see more of the history, but we had to reorder this game and start over from the beginning. So secure that rigging. So now I'm being tasked basically with going from rope side to rope side and securing rigging.
Okay. And is that what would happen to anybody who was playing the game?
Yeah. So we're our job now is to, and you can only, this is as fast as I can walk. This is, oh wait, there we go. I can
That's good, given the storm.
Yes. The funny thing about these kinds of games is that no matter how long you take to do the task, where's my so we could actually continue to walk around the ship, and the game will basically pause the narrative so that you can kind of subvert the storyline to explore environments and other things like that. So like when Jeff was playing a game recently, the Red Dead Redemption, the Frontier game, he often would try, most of the time, spent the game ignoring the story to
And just reading about the other elements.
collecting trading cards, tobacco trading
Collecting,
cards.
and you can also, well, there's two things that happen. You can create your own narrative, and two,
Okay.
you actually can learn about the place and the history that's not told.
Right.
That's merely you're actually as a historian, kind of connecting things that have just been left there, that the developers leave there. And
So-
it never becomes part of the game, but as a player, you learn the history of something by the investigation.
So, who's doing the history content for these
Well,
developers?
that particular version, no. So in general, you have several forms. You have
Here,
in Red Dead Redemption. It's just generalized. It's
It's like wiki summaries.
Yeah.
and the guy who wrote the narrative, Dan Houser's, it's your typical sort of Western ideals of savagery, civilization, and everything. But they do, like you said, with objects, like they do interesting things because, like with the trading cards, playing cards, which they take a lot from the actual card trading system, and then they create their own or add some of the historical bits from wiki searches. Some Assassin's Creed, they do have in-house historians. The guy who was responsible for the French Revolution, they actually consulted with historians. Dr. Clement has a lot to say about that. Because in that case, the argument is they chose a historian that fit sort of the narrative.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and then in other cases, when you have independent developers like John, who's going to come and speak in October, he's a developer coder. So a lot of his research comes, from what he can get, not from historians. So I would say they hire fewer historians for video games and film, though there are people who've tried to.
we're trying to consult and
consult.
get consulting gigs. Ubisoft, I mean, for the Assassin's Creed series, they do a very
They do better than most.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's
good.
right.
But it's better than most, and
they make an effort in
attempt.
some way.
Yeah.
That still conforms to some popular
Most popular
ideas.
notions of whatever topic it is. I like the hard tack. Struggling with there. Now he's starting to look a little more
And
worse for wear.
Yes. I like that you have an optional objective of limiting health loss.
Yes, I did not meet that. I got beat up a little too much. So I'm not going to 100%.
Make ready
this game.
for our arrival, men!
Arrival? I see no land, only this interminable fog.
The gulls tell us all we need to know.
Goals will
Climb
tell
into the
us.
crow's
Climb
nest
into
and
the
you'll
crow's
see.
nest and you'll see. So what this whole boat
is that land
narrative
there?
is about is essentially trying to teach us how to do things like oops, that guy's in my way. Like climb, which I'm failing to do well here. I'll just go with the rigging.
historian Maxime Durand, he's their in-house
He's the
historian.
in-house
So he
historian,
does a
yeah.
lot of things. And so to quote, source says he worked with Ubisoft for more than 3 years to include accurately and represent key elements of history. While his expertise was Canadian history, his knowledge of the time period in American history was exactly what they were looking for. And then to quote Durand, he says, quote, we took a look at all the different
Oops,
tribes that were
shit.
close to New York and Boston in the period. We decided to choose Mohawk because they were the most interesting that appeared during the Revolution. We worked with members of the tribe because we wanted to be appropriate, be respectful, as well as be historic. Still quote, considering the general treatment of Native Americans in video gaming, I think we've got one of the strongest and most accurately portrayed characters that has ever been created. I'm really excited to let people see that.
That's this game.
And there is a Boston Massacre
Scene,
sequence
yeah.
that maybe we'll get to where you have to try to stop part of it.
Yeah.
Well, to stop it from happening. And then they do the Battle of Bunker Hill.
I'd be curious to see how they do the Boston Massacre since
Yes.
there's so
If we
much
don't get,
documentation.
if
on
they
it.
don't get there, I can show
Just arrived
video
to
of
Boston. Yeah,
it where you can see the.
we've just arrived in Boston. Journey to the New World. How'd we do? 125 out of 170.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
We got a 5-minute clip that we can watch
Right.
of it if
Okay,
we don't get
yeah.
there.
But we're now in a point where we can walk around Boston in so this is a
Okay.
load screen essentially that we're working on, and the animus is booting, is how the narrative works. So we're now booting a new memory, and we have just landed on Long Wharf.
Yes. So let's see how their rendition of
1754.
1754.
Right.
Okay.
So this is as we come down the stairs. We're about to meet with
Master Kenway.
Charles
Master
Lee.
Kenway.
Yes, may I help you?
Charles Lee, sir.
Just
Pleasure
a
to
minute.
make your acquaintance.
No,
I've been asked
yeah.
to introduce you to the city, help you settle in. Oh, no need, sir. I've arranged for your bags to be delivered to the inn.
Oh,
Are you
cool.
by any chance John and Isabella's son?
So now we've just met Charles Lee. He's a British soldier, major figure in the Revolutionary War, Colonel of the British Army. Right. So if you are at all interested in the history, there are
Include
these
these
moments
Mm-hmm.
where you can consume, which is essentially just biography.
Yeah.
Right.
And it plays to the kind of great man theory as well a little bit, right?
They
So-
do objects and architecture,
Yeah.
not in the current games, but these games.
In these
yes.
games, and in the most recent games, they've been putting out the DLC, this downloadable content that's called the Discovery Tour mode,
Mm-hmm.
and it strips all the violence out of the
It's-
game, and you can just walk around the environments.
But it's terrible.
It's horrible.
Oh.
It essentially is a museum
Uh-huh.
denuded of anything
One and
interesting.
the same.
I mean,
or
it's-
any interactivity.
or any activity.
Right.
Yeah.
Aye. But he's
So
yet to
here's
reach
Long
America,
Wharf.
and I figured I might, well, at least until he arrives. I thought.
Yes. Out with it.
Forgive me, sir. I had hoped that I
Newspaper
might
boy.
study under you. If I am to serve the order, I can imagine no better mentor than yourself.
See if you take a break,
Kind of you to say.
he'll keep
I
talking,
think you overestimate me.
but you can just cruise around and ignore
You can
him for.
explore the city.
Although this game really wants me to stay within. Okay.
That wasn't very nice. He just randomly kicked that guy.
You can randomly hit somebody if you want.
That's what he did. He just kicked that guy.
Can't hit him. Or you just
You're
get
doing
angry.
what
Get angry.
which Dave wanted to do.
It's just walking. Yeah. So she just tripped and lost her apples, and now he's gonna steal the apple.
You could.
Once we're out of this mission right now, our mission is to follow this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're kind of freed of the objectives, we can free walk the city, and if
Boston's
something
quite a
like that
lively
happens,
city.
you can then
There's all
choose
manner
to
of
chase
things
that
to see and
thief
do.
and try to
Once you've settled
take
in,
him
I
out.
suggest you take some
All
time
the
to walk
enemy
the streets.
are
Who knows what
kind of
opportunities
in
you
red
might
here,
find.
so that suggests that these
Especially
British
when you
regulars
work.
are our
I'll arrange
enemies.
for horses
Hmm.
while you do that.
Is he taking you to the theater?
To the
So-
end.
Way to go by Elizabeth Murray's shop.
Oh, we could.
Oh, because you already went to the opera house.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I have to find a general store. So now I'm kind of free of Charles Lee, and so we can kind of
Explore the
explore. And because we are, so there's the Crown Coffee House, and that will tell us. So it lets you know that tavern, and stop in for the latest drink, and the latest news and a drink. And so you can go. I mean, part of it is you can essentially collect historical location as you're flipping through. And the other thing we're very good at is climbing, so we can. And nobody's impressed by our climbing ability, or
balance.
Oh, and there's the
You can
Yeah.
you get views of the city, which
So-
expands your
government
map.
house.
Yeah.
If you go to the steeple,
So there's a ship being built in the shipyards,
Right.
right? And so we can,
And that's where the Boston Massacre takes
yeah,
place, right
in
up
front
there.
of that,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So if we go, and then
nice save.
just jump down, and so this is we can hit the database and it'll tell us about the market. And nobody really cares that I walk on their food.
Bit antisocial.
Yes, so we can go. I'm going to the steeple to.
It's driven by a narrative where the other
So her
character-
shop was right back there, right behind the.
Okay.
No, right behind the government hall, the state house.
Okay. So back behind. The,
Yeah.
Okay. We can visit. Let's see.
Let's see if they've got a shop there. I doubt it.
There's the state house.
And sometimes you're walking around, you pick up.
Could have been right there. What do they have? What's the label they have on that business there? Can you see?
The,
What, you want to
No,
let her
just-
walk around?
Yeah.
No, just right there.
That one right
Yeah.
there is.
What does it say?
It's
It looks abandoned.
British
leasing? No,
leasing
fishing.
company. And that is the King's Crown, finest food and beverage. They're just making stuff up for those.
Well, they could have. The bunch of grapes is near there. They could have.
He goes to the bunch of.
He does
grapes.
go to the bunch of grapes.
Yes.
Right. What is that there?
Here, let her. Let this.
That's a
moment.
shoemaker.
Mm-hmm.
So
Her shop would have been right there around the corner, someplace right
Somewhere
around
in
there.
here.
Yeah.
So, the her we're talking about is Elizabeth Murray.
Yeah, I know.
For
The
anybody
subject
who's
of-
I'm
watching.
saying
Yeah.
let's let Pat have control.
Have control now. Okay, so because this is just wandering at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
this is walking directions.
Mm-hmm.
This stick moves the camera around so
uh-huh.
that you can do things. And if you do want to climb up to the top of a building, like let's say we're going to go up to the
Just
top
by
of the
chance.
state house, right? You have to be pulling this trigger,
Uh-huh.
and then you just by pulling the trigger, it activates the climb.
I think I might be happy
If you-
being on the ground
Well,
walking.
Okay.
Sean can open the map
Yeah,
for you
let
up
me-
here.
Oh, okay.
And let's get up onto the top. I think this is a lookout spot.
Yeah, it seems to be a high point. Is there a bird up there? It's no problem. You're just gonna stand on it. It's pretty easy.
Yowza.
Right,
Oh, it's
but
not an
what you
official-
get is a 360-degree view of
Boston.
the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about 3/4 scale, the model. And most of the major buildings were
When-
rendered.
Interesting.
So-
when Notre Dame burned down, Ubisoft offered their schematics
Really?
because they had done a lot with kind of
Well, I'm gonna die.
putting it into gameplay.
Yep.
Ooh,
I thought there might be a.
Sorry. So did they use them?
I don't know or think. Well, they're just starting to rebuild it or whatever. So I don't know, but I don't know if it was just publicity, but
So I'll let you take a little wander around. And if you want to walk a little faster, you can hold X down and that walks touch faster. And if you want to climb on things, you just pull that bottom right trigger.
How did I you won't go forward?
There you go. So now you have to kind of control
Oh,
the
I have to
camera.
Yeah.
So
You have to kind of keep the camera behind you, and yeah, there you go. And it eventually starts to become kind of a normative.
didn't mean for you to do that, guy. Sorry.
they don't mind.
No, and they don't care if you run into them.
They might look at you strange.
In video game parlance, they're called NPCs,
What's that mean?
non-player characters.
Oops. Get down. Oh, jeez.
Just X.
Just walk.
Press that button, or just X, or just
Yeah, I'm
walk forward.
stuck on a dick.
You're gonna climb. Any object that you run into, you will climb upon it.
It's natural.
Oh, I'm gonna get dizzy. Oh.
That and is it for the first 5 minutes it feels
Ah! Get down.
Just push your left stick forward.
But I want him to turn around and walk
Yeah,
forward.
there
there
you
you
go.
go.
So you become not only a game player, but also a cinematographer, because you have to dictate the movement of the
Ah,
camera.
get down. Oh.
Oops. Our lights just turned off. We've been sitting in here for a while, apparently. give Jeff a chance to sit there for a minute.
Oh,
Switch up. You
there's
can
no
be
one
on camera.
here.
Huh?
Haven't had a
No. Okay.
That's all right, right?
Ha ha ha.
There, now.
Oh yes.
All the women look exactly the same.
So they do two things for the main, and even some peripheral characters. They do motion capture and facial recognition, and then a lot of the others they just do motion capture. So they'll just repeat the same person because while it may not appear too populated, I mean it's a lot of NPCs walking around.
Say that again. What it means?
Non-player
Non-player characters. So
Alright.
they're just part of the AI, and they're just kind of randomly doing things. Though there will be a few, like there's a newspaper boy in this, right?
Yeah.
There's several different.
Yeah.
Red Dead has one.
You
can
walk-
collect
you'll-
information.
You might run into Franklin. You can go to his workshop.
Oops. Ooh,
Some of those
sorry.
characters will speak.
Yeah.
I was just
Um,
trying to send him down Cornhill and look at the
But one of the
South
interesting,
Meeting House.
yeah,
right
one of
there.
the interesting I think that Ubisoft does with these environments is that they do at least attempt to populate them.
Yeah. They do. They do.
And so there are other games like LA Noire. LA is essentially an empty city.
It's
There's
very-
very few people, and it doesn't ever feel urban or city-like.
Right.
And here, at least, they tried to give that sense. But in doing so, they have to
I wanted to go in.
replicate.
Go just.
Yeah.
You can go right in.
Depends.
Well, in this, it depends. It has to be an available.
Yeah, that.
The other
Yeah.
the other thing is, like, there's so many that there buildings and rooms that there's only.
Yeah, and it's just that because that building still exists and it was
Oh.
important in the American Revolution, that it would be an easy one for
Does she go
to have.
there?
an
Yeah,
interior
yeah,
of.
and what happens is throughout the narrative of the game, the city starts to open up.
Alright.
You've just arrived, right? Having just arrived, are you going to have access to everything in the city?
I'm
sure.
You have to earn your
You get-
place in this
You
in this
gain
world,
you gain access to spaces, and
Yeah.
the spaces then adapt.
and they
to
become
what you're
part
doing.
of the story. And so, like, there will be Patriot meetings at the State House that you might be privy to. Or,
And as you act and react, the soldiers act and react to you differently.
Yeah, like right now, if you walked up onto one of the soldiers and pressed the punch button, it would punch them, and then they will take you on.
But later on, as you get toward the revolution, they'll become more active and
more.
they don't like you, and so you're revolutionary.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to get over to the common.
I like that you can navigate your way through the city, though. That's pretty awesome.
You know where you're going.
Enough maps of colonial Boston.
Can she get on a horse yet? I don't remember.
Probably.
You could trot. I don't
Maybe
know if you can.
approach it, and
There you go. So you can trot around town a little quicker.
Oh, that's good.
You know, you just stole a horse, but
Ah, sorry. Ah!
Maybe not quicker.
I don't want to get off. I want to just go.
You're just running. You're
Just
running
like a
into
person,
the
you would do
stairs.
it. Just like you're walking,
There you
same
go,
sort
yeah.
of movement. And if you go faster, it becomes a little bit more.
Sorry.
No one, they're not real.
They don't
people.
care.
Well, that's another thing is not being real people. Sometimes players act differently
Yeah.
than
See
they
what
might otherwise.
Let's see if we can go down that little alley right there. See, we're not far away, unless I took a wrong turn back there. It's a little bit
There's
hard
not
to
many
tell on
people
the-
that would ever say that about exploring colonial Boston unless I took a wrong turn.
Well, because it's very simple geography, but ouch. See, if we go up here, this should take us. Go on. Go up. Go
Yeah.
up.
Up that alley.
Uh-huh.
You just watch out for the walls.
So we should be getting close to the common.
That looks like a common.
Yeah. Okay, there we are. Okay, let's take a look at. I'm pleased that I did that.
That was very
Nice
good.
work. You knew exactly where you were going. That's the key thing.
Which also suggests something about the maps they're using.
That
Yeah,
they
so-
have.
That they're relatively accurate.
Yeah,
and
I think that's true, but they just kind of reshape them as.
need be.
Yeah.
Sorry, oops, I want to go in. Sorry, people.
I missed this giant opening. This is very normal
Mhm.
for
Somebody who's
when you
never-
start to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go down there.
Try not to run over the soldier, though.
He might get a little
Yeah, he
upset.
might
Oh,
get-
but
now
see,
you
look,
can
he's
see
pushing
there's
around the woman.
Yeah.
That's plausible.
So, and they're kind of occupying that space and
Uh-huh.
have set up camp.
1750. Okay.
Yeah, a little early.
No, I just it doesn't. That doesn't sound right. But because I mean, 1756
Oh,
to 63
56,
is
right.
a 7 years war.
When they-
1754, there are things going on, but I don't. I mean, there might be something going on in Boston, but I don't.
not the substantial possibly.
Well, I mean, you think about troops being camped on the common after 1768.
Yeah,
Um,
after the massacre, or
no.
just before the massacre. Sorry.
yeah.
They so
Okay.
they'll do a lot of that sort of telescoping.
Yeah.
And then what do those little red things mean in the bottom left?
Those are all your enemy. So they're
Those are
treating
soldiers.
Surrounded by
they're
enemies. So what
treating the
happens if I t-
soldiers as enemy. You won't. They won't do anything to you at the moment
get off the
unless you
horse.
the zero button, the O button there will get you off the horse. And so, like, if you hit, yeah,
You just walk away.
Yeah. you
Otherwise, they'll kill you.
can- yeah. Or if you hit the square button right now,
You'll punch him.
Oh.
you'll knock him out.
Sean was going to tell you.
So if you come up, you have to get in within his kind of personal space and hit the square button, and then it'll knock him out. But that will alert the other soldiers, and then they will chase you through the city.
Yeah. And since you know it so well, you might escape.
Otherwise, they just shoot you. See?
What?
They don't want you.
They didn't want you walking
you're
through the.
in
You're in
a
their
soldier
camp.
You
Okay.
can't just go walking through a soldier camp.
Fine. I'd like to stop in a pub and have.
A beer, a tankard of ale, please.
Yeah.
If you go to the general store,
Yeah, so if you follow that green dot now
Oops.
for the 543 meters or 42 meters now, you'll end
you
up
have to
at
go
the
that
store.
direction and then navigate as you can.
But it's on the other side of that tree.
You can jump over it. You can jump over that fence. Hold the right trigger down and you just walk up to that fence.
And you have 500 meters to go, so it doesn't have to be a direct line.
Okay.
And you can take a horse there.
Where'd
Steal
the-
that
where'd the
horse
little
right
green thing
there.
go? Oh, there it is.
And today's one-penny Boston Country Journal.
So they're gonna bother you for a coin.
Go away, children. Why aren't you in school?
Because public school doesn't exist yet.
He could be in a Dane school or something. Why won't he walk? He won't go anywhere.
Go
hit
around
hit the trigger button again.
Which is the
and,
trigger button?
on the front of the controller, and then push through them.
Go on, kids. Trying to get through.
Should, yeah,
I'll get
so
you
you
down there.
should just be able to.
Whoa.
Yep, that was your map. Oops. Jeff turned on our Eagle Vision. The Eagle Vision makes more sense when you play as the Native American character because there's a mythology behind it. But here, you're just.
You're just gray and white.
Jeff really wanted to play, that's all.
I'm very happy for you to take us to the pub.
Okay, I'll get you. How do you turn off Eagle Vision?
You're pushing on that's
No,
what
that-
turns it on.
oh, on it, there
Left
you go.
stick on,
So-
left stick off.
I'll run over there. Tell me if I make a wrong turn, please.
Look at this point. I'm just looking at the green dot. Oh,
Go back.
okay. No, I just wanted to look at that cemetery for a second. So, hold on a second. So King's Church. It's a little bit early. Never mind.
Yeah, it's not
254,
King's
yeah.
Chapel.
King's Chapel. Yeah, because I think that's.
And if it is, it's because
There it is.
Yeah.
So we're.
Oh, it is. That is.
Yeah. Can we go into the cemetery next to that? We'll go to the pub after we go by the graveyard. Go back. No, the cemetery that was just.
Oh,
sorry.
right there. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So it's King's Chapel, which is an Anglican church right there, and I just want to go. Elizabeth
Gotcha.
Murray and
In that
second
church.
husband James Smith are in that burial ground, right in the very back. Let's see
There's
how
King's
accurate
Chapel.
So if you could go all the way to the back row of the cemetery, and let's see what they've got. In the very back, slightly to right of center.
Stop.
You know what? They weren't dead yet
No.
in 754,
Not
so
dead
that
yet.
would be.
We'd have to wait till
That
later
would
in
be
the game.
actually accurate. I'd be curious to know if he came back to this in
That would be.
1770, if there's a tomb there for James Smith.
Well, we'll have to look into that.
Okay, let's go get a drink now.
But I mean, in some ways, how I would play Red Dead is kind of how you're playing this, right? You're looking for things
That I know
you
and just-
know, and
yeah.
you're interested in, or
Subverting the game's
attempting to
narrative.
subvert it, right? You're still.
But not. I mean, and one of the problems with doing that though is it doesn't push the story forward,
Yeah, that's.
and so what you end up with then
It's just
in-
hanging out in
Yeah.
the same time and place.
Oh, there's a bunch of grapes right there. You just went past it. It's to your other side.
I can tell you, if I were that thirsty, I would not
And
be.
Ben
Oh,
Franklin
Ben.
is talking somewhere.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
where is he?
He's just around the corner. I think he's in the market.
I'm in the market.
In
I
this-
saw it pop up.
Yeah.
What's he doing in Boston?
What?
1750
He should be in,
in
Philadelphia.
But
Maybe it was a weekend trip. Just
because everybody traveled.
yeah, it's just just taking a ride.
I assume you having a drink with my beverages into your disorder.
No, not at all.
Where was he?
But
There's
the
a
other-
bunch
I
of
mean-
grapes. Was he in here?
One of the
Can't
things
go
that
in.
is kind of problematic about that forced narrative is then it does treat history in this kind of teleological way, right? Where you have to push through the narrative
Uh-huh.
and progress,
Right.
right?
Who's this guy? He's just selling stuff. Oh, he wants to play a game. I don't want to play a game. I got no time for games. I'm here.
Okay.
Damn.
There's Franklin.
There he
This
is.
cursed city will be the death of me.
You seem troubled, friend.
That's because I am. Greatly so, in fact.
What's happened?
I was robbed. The old Balkan file. Though I've managed to restore what's mine, I fear it's ruined.
You mean the book?
This is no ordinary book. It's an almanac. The first I ever wrote. Benjamin Franklin, pleased to meet you.
Hatham Kenway.
You must be new to Boston.
Why do you say that?
You're still possessed of virtue. To stop and help an old lout like myself. I don't mean to impose, but you
He's
seem
only
a smart
48 in
fellow.
1750.
Yes.
Sure, he's not that old.
No, he's as old as he has always imagined.
Look, I'm not sure if I.
It's all right. If you have the time, hurrah. If not, no harm done. The thing is useless in its current state anyway. But
Is
should
this
you
post
somehow
Paul
manage to
Giamatti's John
restore it,
Adams?
You'll find me inside that general store
Yes.
over there.
Because it.
No, it's no. This is
1754?
no. This is pre.
No.
This came out
That was
in
interesting.
the original.
Because it seems a little that character, that representation
Oh.
of Franklin seems a little inspired
That's
by.
a great question. Wasn't the same character actor the same Ben Franklin all the time in all the Ben Franklin
Yes,
representations?
but I don't. But he doesn't. To me, he looks more like Paul Giamatti
This was a-
as Adams than that
Than the
Franklin
other guy.
character actor. Yeah.
So this originally published in 2012.
So more
and
Giamatti than the other guy?
Adams HBO was 2008, so it's.
I think that
yeah.
because that's usually not how Benjamin Franklin
Franklin,
is
right.
represented.
No,
It's
he's
funny.
a little more jollier.
A little
usually.
jolly, a little bit longer
Longer
hair.
hair.
I
Just get to the general store so we can push this thing
I
forward.
Well,
That was not the general store.
I know. That was Ben.
That was Ben, and now so the side mission there is to collect almanac pages throughout the game.
It's a pain in
because
the.
they're part of some
They're part of. So
secret
then, when you do
message.
and restore it, Ben Franklin will reward you with some.
Right. Well, that looked like a pretty good set of shelves in that store.
So, normal weapon.
Hmm.
So this is now where you start picking up your.
It's a lot of money. What is that money based on? Those prices can't be right.
Based on the game's economy, because
It's not.
it can't be correct because I
I
don't
mean,
think
they could be. You could look up.
You could,
there are those
right.
books of like what would things cost in such and such a year.
Yes,
Right.
and this is not one of those situations.
No,
Okay.
and I think what they're trying to do is create an economy in game that creates interest, rather, because if you put them at such a low price,
Yeah. So
Right, okay.
the difficulty
it
is
wouldn't
people
per
don't
player.
compute for now
Right.
what that means.
Right.
So having your
It's like changing the terms or language in a film, right? No one would get that joke if presented
Right.
that
Got
way
it.
then.
Yeah.
so you got a sword and a gun.
I got it. I got my sword and gun. You want to look at the shelves? We got this guy. Hey, how you doing?
I think it said it was Hancock's shop, so he's a merchant. But I mean,
You
anyway.
go out that door now.
Check the calendar. Is it changed?
Calendar?
Is it the right?
What?
Is it Gregorian or is it Julian?
Plantation
Colonies.
colonial.
But
Cool.
that's
Oh,
just made up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
No way. Accordion boy watching a squirrel.
But why wouldn't a shop have a calendar on it? Yeah, and that's part of these interiors too, right? Is this the kind of it's a kind of
Oversimplified.
popular. It's oversimplified, but it's also a popular notion of what should be in a general store in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? Rooted in not just a colonial context, but if general store means something
Yeah.
to somebody,
Well,
you're
and-
going to populate it with all the kind of
Right.
randomness.
Well, and most of the things that were on the list of what was for sale
Right.
were foodstuffs as
Right.
well as some rum, and there was a reference to room and board,
Right.
but nothing about all the imported British
British
goods
stuff,
that it
right.
would have actually been full of.
Right. You can put your hidden blade on.
Do you want to have her watch the Boston Massacre scene?
Let's do that.
Achilles.
Who stands in Parliament for Boston? For New York? For Virginia? No one. Everyone. But Old Sound was represented. And Newport and Newtown, Seaford and Saltash. The list goes on. Rotten boroughs, one and all. And yet, there are men who speak the word. These places, what has become of the rights of Englishmen? Are we not entitled to have a say in our...
So you're playing here
That's Connor.
as Connor.
We're headed to the customs
And is
house
he
to
an
toss
assassin?
some whips
He
and
is at
balls.
this.
He's a Native American.
So
Sam, come on.
What happened?
Ruffle some
That's
red
what we're
back
going to
feathers.
find
With me.
out.
And this is his trainer who trained him as an assassin, who's an African
Down
American.
to the customs house for a spree. Come on.
I mean, in some ways, what Ubisoft's trying to do is empower marginalized characters in the narrative.
You know. And during this part of it, you're supposed to follow him, but you can kind of explore a little bit. You know, because he's going slows.
I say again, disperse. Congregating in this manner is forbidden.
We're not going anywhere, Bud.
Why don't you go back to England? No good can come of this chaos. Return to your homes, and all will be forgiven.
Never.
Not until you've answered for your crimes. You're right,
You don't scare us.
He stands unarmed. We ain't afraid.
Is there? My father. Yes, which means trouble is sure to follow. I need you to Taylor's accomplice. This crowd is a powder keg. Be careful. can't allow him to light the fuse. But nothing. Do as I say and go.
Come on, you gosh-gutted coward! It doesn't shoot at me! Hey, Lobster! Go ahead! Fire your little gun!
So the secondary narrative is this character that we've been playing, Hathaway, has a son, Connor, who he abandons and sells the native village to the British, essentially, and it burns to the ground.
So
It's
do
like
we
Star
see
Wars.
him meet
Yes.
the
It's just like Star
woman and
Yeah.
have a relationship?
Not have the
and-
relationship,
Yeah.
but
You.
so now in this scene he's trying to follow his father and to find out.
No, this
where
is
he's going.
suspicious man who is going to shoot somebody.
Oh, and
He's
start
the instigator of the Boston Massacre. So it's like
Oh.
the second gunman theory,
Right.
right?
Right.
So they're employing a lot of conspiratorial mechanisms.
Well, if that was supposed to be the massacre setting a minute ago, they got the key detail wrong, which is that Captain Preston was not behind his men
He's
when they're saying he was in
front.
front.
Won't be long before the culture poison.
So your job is to try to stop him from getting the shot off.
Just a fail.
Hear my signs clear as day.
By doing that.
Your plot is ended. Not quite.
Oh, damn you! Fire!
Then it's just escape.
Then it's just a chase.
Yeah. That's the Boston Massacre for you.
Okay.
You think?
Yeah.
No.
Any other thoughts?
Well, it's just because it's all of this hypothetical, counterfactual material, it doesn't really convey a whole heck of a lot about the revolution or the
Right.
grievances of the people involved
Right.
and so on.
They take the event, which everybody knows abstractly, and just
Right.
use it as that.
Yeah, yeah. It's scenery.
It's scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
Nek di ohando yo
that's a
hawitum
scene
ya
from
de hagana
Native American, the Mohawk.
di nuer do jokwa templar al guego tadinero darhox ne on ha at get sarnis di got get soon early on a higun sagandano a got gatto di ne sagar la scarnex.
And this is the young assassin's mother.
Yes.
And it'll come out of there. So we're watching a section which shows the Mohawk village, and
So we're up to 1760 now.
yes.
So, how many hours long is this whole thing? If it takes you
This is in
A quick play,
50 to 60 hour game.
You're kidding.
No.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way up through the revolution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and this video has 10 hours of gameplay in it.
Sit one day stuff.
So we've gone back, obviously, from the Boston Massacre. We saw him as a child.
How was Nexi Dosa Easy Nakahonda di Yahaza?
I want to make sure we're not too far. So,
He goes out on a hunt.
goes out on a hunt, meets a bad guy, and then he comes back and his village is on fire because it's the 7 Years' War, French community. So the idea is here you have to save people as your village burns.
And you're looking for your grandmother and your mother, I think?
Yeah.
Are they okay?
No.
Not really.
This is why Connor becomes an
Comes to
assassin.
I should have showed this one first, but
It's all very impressive visually.
That meant, yeah.
I think we could.
Yeah, and for those, I mean, I think for people who have a kind of penchant towards history, right, it's not necessarily an interest in learning history from these games, but being able to play in the playground of the past.
Yeah, no, it seems like that would be fun if you like to
Yeah.
think about yourself. Like, I enjoyed wandering around colonial Boston,
Mm-hmm.
seeing if I could find my way to the common.
And you did.
And it was fun that there it was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's, for a lot of players, that's what you're playing for, especially the Assassin's Creed series in some ways.
So when you first played this, what were you trying to do, and what did you do?
Oh, the novelty of just being able to walk around that space was pretty
incredible.
fantastic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just having a scale model and an avatar that you can occupy,
Yeah.
right? A colonial setting.
Right.
And I mean, eventually that wandering does become boring. And because
because you have to open things up,
Yeah.
and to open things up, you have to actually play the game. If you will.
Right.
And so there's this kind of you're forced back to the narrative, and you're forced into, right, a situation in which the game will inevitably become incredibly bloody, very violent, to the point where once it's open to where you're an assassin, you can wander through and just quietly kill redcoats and just mount the body count.
So you're just going around killing
kind of go
people.
around and kill people. Yeah.
Do you run into other people who are known historical characters beyond Franklin?
Yeah.
So you might run into Adams and Hancock.
Adams, Hancock, Hamilton.
Any women?
No.
Except for the Native American grandmother.
Yes.
But other than that.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, I was thinking within colonial Boston, where we know the names of lots of people who live there.
Yeah, and that becomes an issue with a lot of games. Some games have attempted to remedy that.
I like the cat.
Yeah, there's
You can
the
stop
cats and
and pet 'em.
dogs, so you praise them. Some have tried to add them, but not always in the most or best historical way. It seems like the attempt now is to just get them in.
Yeah. So the primary characters are Washington Franklin, Sam Adams, Paul Revere, Israel Putnam, James Barrett, Benjamin Talmadge, Lafayette, Admiral de Grasse, Thomas Jefferson, Benedict Arnold. Those are kind of the big names that will pop up in the narrative. And then they have like the minor characters that we met on the boat, right? That kind of attempt to bring every day.
So presumably this guy and his son eventually have a climactic confrontation?
Yes, they do.
And who survives?
Depends on how you play it.
Oh.
They have to give you a...
they have to give you your revenge moment.
Yeah, this
right?
binary choice about what to do. But that's about it. But it doesn't... I mean, in that sense... It doesn't deal with history in that sense. It's just dealing with sort of game choice and how you want to play.
Right. The people look kind of big. I mean, if the average man is 5'4", they look pretty buff and large.
This is true in a lot of games, and the clothing. Yeah,
those women look very buxom.
Yeah. Well, this is another issue with gameplay. Is these sort of gendered and masculine, feminine tropes that appear, are thrown backwards from. And a lot
and
of the
nobody's
people,
carrying anything.
they're all at the market. No one's buying anything.
And I'm not sure about, and they may have been, but about when the streets would have had any kind of paving.
Don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what the.
And that's an
when that
interesting point,
happened.
because like if these particulars, if they could put anything in there and it would be taken as almost authentic. And our students, like Sean has done polls, and I've asked too, a lot of students, a lot of history majors, a majority, really had a historical experience with a video game that attracted them to bring them the history.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, that's great.
Yeah.
And part of it, I mean, is
And
just
there
really
may
just
have
getting
been-
to play these spaces, right,
Yeah.
that you've read about or.
Yeah.
Oops.
And there certainly may have been cobblestones already in the streets in 1794. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder though if that's, I mean, because almost all the streets are cobbled,
It just
including
is-
alleys, and I wonder if it's just an attempt to kind of meet the expectation of the consumer at that point, rather than there's a kind of quaintness to it and a kind of.
But
Yeah,
also the
that was
amount
nice.
of material that has to be put into it. At what point do you say we're going to make this street that, this street that,
Yeah.
this street that?
Right.
You know, there is a tremendous amount of detail
Yeah.
in the game.
And they could have. It's interesting to me because just the history of 18th century consumer developments, that the clothing is fairly generic, because that you would have seen much more variety, much more brightly colored clothing. Like he's in blue and gold with a splash of red. The British soldiers are wearing red, but the attire is otherwise fairly monochromatic.
Yeah.
And in a marketplace like that or in a shop, you would have seen
Have you been told why it is I've come to Boston?
scarlets and indigos and very bright yellows and reds of different hues.
And have you had any luck
It would have,
with that?
and you would have seen more lace, more ribbons, more stripes. So it would have been a bit more colorful.
And that plays into an idea I've been toying with, is the environments they create, whether it's a person or the structures, are made. It's in an obviously centuries ago or a century, whatever game you're playing, are made to look old and drab as we expect them to be. So people, when they play it, think that it is old.
Right. And that's one of the things I've noticed about some of these buildings. They don't look in a great state of repair, but they're meant to be architecturally 18th century buildings.
Right.
And probably relatively recent. I mean, there's only one 17th century building still in existence in Boston today, and it's a house that Paul Revere lived in. It's in the North End. But architecturally, it's very different, and these brick buildings are new and expensive during this period. But I'm not sure. I mean, Boston wasn't doing great economically in the middle of the 18th century, but it seems not altogether likely that buildings right in this particular area would be boarded up or have big holes in the sides.
Right.
Great. I'm going to use you as a source for my idea for my next conference paper. All right.
Sure.
I mean, this is an idea I see in a lot of games, that to make oldness, you make the structures old, even though they weren't old
No,
then.
they
So
wouldn't.
players
At the time, right.
feel
No.
like they're in an old environment.
Yeah, and
Fancy something
this
Female,
is
there's a female tavern keeper.
Yeah.
there
What
for
is it, a
there
bitch?
you go. Well, can we hear her talk?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
She
Of
has a
course.
funny.
Masters Lee and Kenway. Was
she's
it?
done.
I'll have your bags brought up.
Again,
Yeah, she was just sent away.
it's time for
Do you require
men to work.
anything further?
Only privacy.
Making her take this stuff up. Yeah, we missed her voice.
This
Sorry.
way.
That's all right. That's all right.
You got an email.
Yeah. 'Cause-
So, in the sense of like a judgment of, I guess it can't be final, of how video games, from your one experience, treat history, how would you?
Sir,
Would you
William
would
Johnson.
your original ideas be that you came to it the kind of the
Pleasure.
same as you
A
as
good man.
now?
if a bit earnest.
I don't know, because I don't really yet have a sense
Right.
enough of character and
I'm
plot,
told you're
because
putting together an
obviously when
expedition.
one thinks about
We believe
history
there's a
and
precursor site in the
agency
region.
and
I
actors
require your
and
knowledge of the land and its
contingency,
people.
a lot of it has to do with trying to
Sadly,
understand
my
people's
research has been
perspectives and
stolen. Without
motivations,
it, I'm of
and
no use to you.
it's
Then we'll
very
find it.
plot driven, of
Needs?
course, this video
My
game,
associate,
but the plot
Thomas Hickey,
is one that's
has been
not
making the rounds.
in the context
He's
of
quite
these
good at
people's
representing
experiences.
Well, tell me
So-
where I can find him.
It's
I'll see if I
fun,
can't speed
very
things up.
fun to be able to see
We've heard
colonial
rumors
Boston,
of bandits operating
even
from
in a state of
compounds
disrepair,
somewhere.
and to see
You'll like to find him there.
to see the King's Chapel
Charles?
burial
Sir.
ground not all the way to the back
best
fence. So
be
that
on, of
really
course.
struck me. If somebody had actually paid attention to that level of detail about the location and design of tombstones and had really plotted out, because they have records, you can actually at the church look and see who was buried where and when. So somebody could have done that, but that would have been a really painstaking task, and that's kind of interesting. So just from walking around, I think that would be kind of fun, even to show students.
And that's where Ubisoft has gone, right? The Discovery Tours are essentially
But they
just
took
a,
it to a degree
just
that
a
is
walkabout.
banal.
Yeah,
Right, but
and-
then if it's not accurate, then you're again substituting a Hollywood
Right.
or developer's vision of what these places looked like.
right. So
Because it's like the ceilings are too high, you know, the buildings are in
and-
too much of a state
yeah.
of disrepair.
that's one thing. Like all of these buildings, at some level, have to maintain so that I can do something like this. They have to have handholds and windows in a
Right.
place that makes them climbable.
climbable.
Right. And so often the landmarks will have
Different.
weird architecture elements
Mhm.
so that I can climb on them and be
Yeah.
able to escape. And
Right. And if one actually were trying to do this based on what there was available out there, it would just have big black gaps for all the places
Right.
that you couldn't, so it would be very spotty, right?
Mhm.
Here's a building, there's a building, and the extrapolating makes it fun to go through. I was expecting to see a huge amount of blood and guts, and thank you for not showing
there
me
are
that.
pockets you get to certain episodes where
Yeah.
this does happen,
Thomas
But-
Hickey.
but they are particularized
Who's
in certain
asking?
moments.
Right.
There's a lot of sort of individual, like I
Is that
killed
supposed
one
to mean
guy,
something?
Mhm.
and
Show
then
some respect,
if you
boy.
get in
Peace,
certain
Charles.
situations, it's a bit more.
William Johnson sent us
Bloody.
in hopes we might
Right.
expedite your search.
But I wish that there were more
Don't need none of
good
your
movies
fancy
set
London
in
speak
these
neither.
right.
I found the
and
men that done the
places. Or what
theft.
was that?
Then why are you just
Was it
lazing
called
around?
Colonial House? Remember when there was
Yes,
very-
on PBS.
or
Yes.
something like that,
It was,
you know,
yeah.
Figuring out how to deal
where
with
you're
those
really trying
bodies.
to get people into
I have an
a
idea.
setting like the Living
Well, let's
History
hear it.
Museum at Plymouth Plantation,
I'll
which
kill the
is
lookout,
extraordinarily
take up
well
a
done,
position
where the amount
behind
of
the guard.
research they did on the
You two
architecture,
approach from
design,
front.
location of every
When
single
I open fire
structure,
on the group,
every
you
single
charge in.
character who inhabits
About the
the
element of
space,
surprise on our
who
side.
sticks
Half will fall
exactly
before
to
they've even
the
realized what's happened.
vocabulary
Mm.
of 1630 or 40, whatever year it might
Yeah.
be set, and doesn't set outside of the knowledge available at that moment in time. That would be great.
So this game
That's like King's Village in New
sold
Brunswick.
12
It's the
million.
same
So
thing.
this
Mhm.
game sold 12 million copies.
Wow.
That's how many people have, right?
At least
At
attempted
least
to play.
attempted or
And then
interacted with.
the
with
question
this.
is, how many of those 12 billion have ever read a book about the American Revolution?
Yeah.
Or is it they've learned about it in 5th grade and
Get into
8th
position.
grade and 11th grade?
For me to take the first shot.
And that I think builds in the developers have an expectation of their game players and what they want and what they know.
Right.
So that's also built into the game. Like people know the Boston Massacre. I mean, you would include that anyway, but
Right.
those moments are definitely there. Well,
And maybe the appeal of this kind of character is that because we know what the very famous ones did, and they're often fairly wooden kind of figures, it wouldn't be as much fun to try to be those people, right?
Well,
'Cause
how
we already
could
know
you?
what they did.
Right.
Yeah,
You
how could you?
couldn't.
So you have to be somebody who's
Mhm.
not one of the famous ones, but you want them to be important and a powerful
Yeah.
actor.
yeah. Unless you're, play the tyranny of George Washington.
So right now, I'm now trying to assassinate people. I don't know
Not
what
that.
the range of this weapon is. Apparently
Those
not
aren't
very
people.
far.
I don't think you want to kill those people.
Oh, those are my dudes.
Yeah, those are your dudes.
Okay.
So if they're your dudes, you can't kill them normally.
Right. What is this place supposed to be?
This is the fort. What fort? The fort.
Are you sure I'm not supposed to be killing these guys?
Well,
It would
there's
turn red. Oh, there it
there's
goes.
Castle Island out in the harbor.
I don't know. You can see where he's playing here, which is still part of Boston.
I'm gonna die.
What
So.
year?
We haven't moved forward.
We
so
haven't moved. Still 1754.
It's also kind of interesting that it spans the whole period from the French and Indian War through the Revolution.
And hours and hours of gameplay in this one.
So once you've played it through once, do you play it through again?
Sometimes.
Try to do
Sometimes.
something else?
Sometimes.
Yeah, or certain aspects
Moments
of them. Yeah.
that you change.
Because presumably you could get better at doing different
Yes.
parts of it once you know it's coming.
These aren't
What now?
as much like that. Some games
you by
are
the
where they
door with
set
those.
different levels
Go
of
on,
difficulty. But then sometimes you make choices that can affect gameplay. So you might go back and change that.
So am I supposed to? Oh, here I can see if I can shoot him. Yep.
He just jumped off.
I thought I was
Did
shooting the powder kegs, but
not. Like how the
apparently-
guy's behind you, just waiting for you to get the job done.
Nope.
Huh?
Weird.
Are you aiming? You doing L2?
I am. That's L2. Am I supposed to hit
The kegs down below.
kegs below or the kegs in the back of the?
Oh, it's.
Gotta reload. Alright, that suggested.
I
But
think-
he's shooting high.
Yeah. I can't help you.
Yeah. My men are waiting around for me to hit
They're,
it,
no
so.
one's really concerned. As long as you get the job done.
We can just sit here and I can't do anything but
Shoot.
shoot. And
Shoot the
they
pod.
say
I think
18
they're at the bottom.
meters. I mean,
Yeah, your target is
it's right there.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
On with the show then.
That's what
Alright,
they
now
want
we'll go
to do. Now everybody's happy and ready to.
I would be interested in knowing if after playing a game like this, then somebody went and
Guess they wasn't
looked
so
up
safe
anything
inside
about
after
this.
all.
Like if it got them more interested, like you said, you found out students
Right.
got interested in history because of games.
I
Did they
think-
actually bother to read
This'll fetch a pretty penny.
books about
Save your looting for after we found
military
Johnson's research.
encounters during the
Yes,
Revolutionary
master.
War, or more about the causes of any of these?
Yeah, I often play with
Wars.
the computer next to me. So.
I know.
You?
Yeah,
There
just
are
so
walkthroughs where other
Yeah.
people, like a walkthrough is where someone records what I showed you,
Uh-huh.
and then so you don't have to always play the game to see the game. There are walkthroughs where people do that, and then talk about it
Right.
and are interested in it.
Ooh.
Lay down your weapons, and I'll consider letting you live.
I make you the same offer. We've no quarrel.
It's
Yeah,
just
this is
calm and
turn this
cool.
chest
John
was
Woo
right below.
moment.
Nothing rightful about Mr.
The
Johnson.
Mexican standoff.
There's no standoff yet.
I
Now
won't
there's a
ask.
standoff.
Agreed.
How about that? Tri-corner standoff.
Mm-hmm. Come on, sort out.
This is kind of how the fighting goes.
Well, I was worried from that trailer that I looked at yesterday. It just looked grotesquely bloody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
There can be blood.
Your kind has no need for books
And-
and maps. Who put you up to this?
yeah, and as your weapons
seen a
progress,
person.
right? I mean,
It's always been
at
dead
some
for
level right
years.
now, we're at such an
They
early
always
stage in the
pay,
game.
we do the job.
All I have is a single flintlock and pretty weak sword.
Well,
Soon I
those
will
days are
have
done.
my assassin kit,
tell your masters.
and
I
there
said
you
as
can
much.
send darts into people and string them up in trees
Wow.
and do all kinds
And is
of
that all sort of hidden in the
fairly- yeah.
clothing?
And it's all, and then the
Should I
violence
say you
becomes
are?
almost fetishistic.
You don't?
And right,
Bill.
and
Do you have to
conspiracy
get more
driven.
violent to
Yes.
get through the game?
It does. It precludes you from using stealth
Yeah.
and anything to get
You can't
around.
just kind of sneak through. You have to kill people.
Yeah. It's a lot of
So you get rewarded for killing people.
because to advance the narrative, like they don't often give you another option.
Right.
And it's one of the things that, and so now I'm looting dead bodies, right? Looking for.
The wealth and availability of weaponry and ammunition is
Don't
extraordinary.
let go of the chest, Charles. We'll take care of this rebel.
Considering the cost of it, that's also extraordinary.
So.
Sean Cleary
A little of the old violence. Yes, this is a kind of.
Are you mad?
In some ways,
In
this
case
just
you've
becomes
forgotten, we're in the midst
these
of
little
something.
missions where
Why's you always got to go and spoil
make
the
it. This is
sport?
where the game is made, right? I mean, people aren't necessarily playing for the history. The history is tangential to these. Like right now, this is the stealth mission where.
But it's a history also that, like, particularly for Assassin's Creed, or even to the extent Rockstar, draws people to the game, right? You make a game about these different historical periods, or the West, or L.A. Noire, right? These situated eras that people have an idea about and interest in. Gives them an environment that they can play.
It gives them an environment they can play, but it seems a little bit bereft of history.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's
Yes.
it's not just static. It's a set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the person who's doing the historical content, I don't know how that person can figure out issues of motivation or causation or consequence or ethical perspectives on history, all of these things that we think of as historical
Sure.
skills.
They don't. Or they are subsumed by the developer and the commercial aspect.
Right.
That their ideas become trumped in some ways.
Now it's a cowboy movie, right? So shooting people
Yeah.
off the roof.
Everything's a Western.
I hope whatever's in this chest is worth it.
I mean, it becomes that in some ways, right? It becomes, again, they embody the sort of, all of these characters embody the lone stoic male who's on a quest to achieve something without
Community or-
their community
yeah.
or their objective being sidetracked in
Yeah.
any way.
And people that get in the way are just cannon fodder.
Should we do a wrap up?
Yeah, we should probably. So, 'cause we're about to get. So it's just pop up shoot people.
Thank you for not making me kill a bunch of people.
I think the next time we meet, you'll have played the 60 hours.
That's your homework.
I think
once
that-
once you leave this space, you now have to commit to playing through the entire game.
I think that is unlikely. I'd like to see games like this have some introductory material that people had to be reading through and
Like a
exploring.
prerequisite?
Right.
Yes, a prerequisite for playing the game.
Before you play this, you must read.
So that they knew something about the history of the
Yeah.
Knights Templar or the American Revolution, or could maybe look at primary sources of maps of Boston.
See, that
or
would be a more interesting way
engravings
to do the educational version.
Right.
So when Ubisoft does an educational version of their latest games of Odyssey, which is set during Cleopatra era, right?
Odyssey.
I mixed them up.
You're mixing them up.
Okay.
Odyssey is the Greek.
Greek. So let's say the Greek is is they throw you in there without any of the violence or anything, and the objects there then they just say something, but there's no real
there's a path
discussion or
there's a path put in
discourse
your
or
way,
investigation.
and you walk. So it'd be like walking through Boston again, but when you got to one of the pubs or to the State House, it would just say press here. And
so then it's kind of like being in a museum where they're trying to do the
and it's
things.
intractable. You have to follow that.
And all they are, I mean, to be honest, all they are Wikipedia entries for these things.
But for something like the American Revolution, we know that there was a lot of espionage that happened in it, and we know that there were a lot of non-combatants involved in passing messages, in crossing lines, and those folks could be incorporated potentially into a game that would be kind of interesting.
That'd be very interesting.
That would also be more historically plausible as well as revealing and educational, because then you're getting people to think about what it's like to have a war and a revolution going on, where somebody who's a member of your same family may be on the opposite side, or where you as a woman are disagreeing with your husband and trying to go behind his back, as the case is with General Gage, whose wife was an American, and thus the Battle of Lexington and Concord ends the way it does because an American spy woman who's married to a British general is involved. I mean, those people could be a very different and kind of engaging way to encounter it.
Let's make a game.
Well, but I don't know if people would want to play it, but you could have the same kinds of danger. And when the Hessians are in New Jersey, a lot of women are threatened, right? And so this is part of what informs the Patriot cause. We need to protect the daughters and mothers, but it's based on more of the real history. So it's, I guess to me, it seems like the Knights Templar and the whole time-traveling assassin is not just not particularly accurate, but it's really a distraction from what are really compelling stories
could
that
be
could
within
be made
a game.
fun.
I think that developers come away with an idea that they need to have something like that
because they don't realize how interesting history is,
or they don't think people think that would be interesting
or fun, right?
Because if they get the idea, let's say from a historian, they're trying to shove it into some algorithm and idea of what a game player who they have an idea of who it is, even if it isn't that, even as your 15-year-old in the basement playing, right? Which it is not. That they, I don't know.
But there are people who are on prison ships, who escape, who have all kinds of amazing experiences, and then you make the revolution immediate and emotional and political.
It would be great to have them consult a broader range of historians, because that is not there.
Right, but I think what you were saying is they have a template and this ideal consumer, and they're artificially imposing this narrative, right? Because you said it's time traveling assassins.
And and so I think also a lot of it is also it's about player expectation in terms of mechanics and other things like that. To make the games you're talking about would be to kind of redesign and reinvent gaming systems.
Not about a system, but about how you employ characters. But when I think of what Pat's saying is that, like, a totally different example is Thimbleweed Park, which you hated. But you can play multiple characters from multiple perspectives. You have to.
Well, and see, that's what I'm thinking. Then if you've got multiple characters, then you've got lines of communication, the mobility of people and goods and ideas, and maybe that doesn't sound exciting, but that's...
Well, a lot of these things are the same thing. Like those side missions, you're just going to get a map. You're going to get... It's a MacGuffin. It's just a thing that you have to go do. So if that thing was something else, but within a historical setting, it doesn't really change the quest. It just historicizes it.
And then you've got women who are in disguise fighting as soldiers, like Deborah Sampson. You've got Phyllis Wheatley, African American poet, writing
Writing
about the
about
revolution. I mean, you could just have all sorts of other people floating around.
Right.
Not just Ben Franklin losing pages of his almanac.
No.
Well, and I think it would also take a deeper reading of the revolution as well, right?
Yeah.
Something that a game development company's probably not interested
But if they're
in
consulting,
doing.
yeah, because the amount of money they pour into these games is immense. It's huge, but
and so then it strikes me as a missed opportunity.
they could afford to hire
That
a
they
couple
could-
historians.
Well, a bunch of historians and then some screenwriters to think about how do we turn this rich history into compelling action that people can play.
Right.
Yeah, I think they do it the other way. How do we use the action? We have action. What do we use
How
as a
do we
backdrop?
overlay this onto something else?
Right.
Right. And then what can we? And so the Assassin's Creed series is now in its seventh iteration.
It's been around a long time.
Right. So it's marched us through the Crusades, through the Renaissance,
To the 20th century.
into North America, then back to France for the French Revolution,
England.
then England in the 19th century. Now it's gone back to Egypt and Greece.
Or why not take the Outlander approach, where you have a person from today who time travels back to the past, who has to navigate it without getting exposed and therefore killed as a witch, but who maybe finds helpers along the way.
Or clues. You have
right.
to tie it together. Yeah. There's not a lot of, and I found this in a lot of newer sort of big AAA games where there's not a lot of tying clues together in these. There's just a string of narrative. Where in the 80s and 90s, you often had to figure out some, even in like King's Quest from Sierra Designs, there were clues you had to sit there and think about for a little bit.
Riddles,
right?
That were more fun than
in Myst or Riven, which are different, but these games aren't so much about figuring things out. That's why I like just to kind of roam sometimes and sort things out. There's no sorting. It's get there and do the mission.
Do the mission, and often it's formulaic. Right, it starts with stealth, violence, escort somebody else, escort somebody out, right? And then just kind of rinse and repeat throughout the game. It's fun still, but it is
you could
very
do that
much,
with real people.
Yeah, you could.
You could do it with
And I think
representations of real people.
Yes, but I mean real historical figures.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're just afraid to put.
I don't think we're classifying all these
the
people together,
but
which is problematic. But there is a formula, and the market is so big. I think we've mentioned it before, but the market is
billions of dollars now.
It's 100 times bigger than Hollywood, which is immense. You sell 12 million copies at $60.
Wow. That's crazy.
Not just one game.
Well, they need more historians.
And for a game, they need more. Yes, they need. Well, let's
end on
we're
that.
starting a company.
Yeah.
That's fine.
If anybody wants us. So.
And the problem that the people who are interested in potentially hiring a historian tend to be the independent developers who can't afford to
hire people.
Right.
Right.
Because they want to do interesting things and experiment with the medium, whereas a AAA house wants to make certain that they're going to sell a game. Yeah. Right. They can't afford to put millions of dollars into something and have it flop.
But couldn't it be the great innovation?
Could be, or it could be the biggest flop ever.
Yeah.
And
E.T.
and Ubisoft and Rockstar don't want to flop.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
And
we'll sign off.
We are.